a.m. in New York City, 10 a.m. in London. Good morning, I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Let's get you set up for the day. A blockbuster debut, SK Hynix raises $26.5 billion in the biggest first-time share sale in the US by a foreign company. The US says talks with Iran are continuing despite 2 days of clashes this week, a relatively quiet night last night. And Fed Chair Warsh names the leaders of 5 task forces that will examine the central bank's policy approach. Let's get a check on markets around the world now. Some interesting developments in Japan. Let's start off in Hong Kong with Winnie Su for the latest from Asia. Winnie.
Yeah, morning, Bonnie. It's quite a nice way to wrap up our week here in Asia after a very volatile week. Now we have the MSCI Asia here up almost 1%, supported by technology shares that were gaining on the back of Micron's spending plans. But also in the afternoon, we did see those gains trimming a bit ahead of that U.S. listing by SK Hynix. As you just mentioned, this is going to be the biggest U.S. listing by any foreign company, and also the third biggest listing in the world in history. But we also see a bit more caution ahead of China's memory giant CXMT's IPO next week, and hence you did see that dragging down the benchmark CSI 300 down about 2%. Flip the board, we take a look at Japanese assets. Very interesting. You mentioned this triple rally we are seeing across assets, with the Japanese yen strengthening about 0.5% and yields down about 10 basis points across the curve, and Japanese stocks extended a bit of gains. And that's coming after Finance Minister Satsuki Katayama urged pension funds to buy more domestic assets as well. Back to you, Bonnie.
Certainly helping the yen today, Winnie as well. Winnie Su there in Hong Kong after a big week. Now let's get over to London for a look at Europe with Justina Lee. Justina.
Good morning, Bonnie. Now, the Stocks Europe 600 is down a little bit today, but not as much as U.S. futures right now. Tech shares are falling, but a lot of those cyclical sectors, like car makers and miners, are doing better today. 2 big movers out of Europe today. EasyJet surprisingly got a counterbid from Apollo that beat the original proposal it got from an investment firm called Castlelake. And another kind of big mover today, Vodafone, its biggest shareholder, just sold their entire stake to a vehicle controlled by the billionaire Xavier Niel at a premium, and that's why it's surging today. Now, if we flip the board here and look at fixed income, generally, we're seeing yields down a little bit. The news out of Japan that Winnie talked about probably helped. And also oil falling a little bit. And so it does feel like investors are going into the weekend kind of with quite a bit of calm. But of course, it all depends on what headlines we get out of the Middle East over the weekend as well.
Exactly, Justina. Thank you, Justina Lee there in London. And essentially, markets have erased all of that war shock already, absorbing it pretty much in the tech sector. We had the Philly Stocks Index up for 2 days straight, more than 5% put on to the Philly Stocks in the last 2 sessions. As you can see, we do have futures pointed a little lower today after those gains. We are expecting the SK Hynix offering, though, and that may buoy things a little bit later on in the session. And that all said, volume is extremely low. We seem to have started into the summer lull when it comes to trading after a massive month of June. Same deal for Treasuries, although we have a little bit more clarity now as to what Fed Chair Kevin Warsh is planning in terms of task forces. We have many names. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on in the program. As you can see, yields coming down, but just ever so slightly, a couple of basis points across the curve. And then oil also, while it did hold on to some gains, it is not putting on any extra gains. We're staying around $76 a barrel for Brent, and we're approaching that $70 a barrel mark once again for WTI. The VIX index, by the way, back down to a 15 handle. All right, let's get to some individual market movers this Friday. Over to London and Chloe Melly.
Good morning, Bonnie. Netflix is in focus this morning after a report from the Wall Street Journal that the company is considering adding live channels and bundling some streaming services in an effort to counter this declining subscriber engagement. And so we had seen the shares as weak a little bit at the beginning of this pre-market trading, but now we're up slightly as investors try and digest those potential changes. Moving on to CCC Intelligent Solutions, which is an insurance software firm which is rising quite strongly this morning morning, about 8%, after Reuters reported that the company is exploring a potential sale. Analysts are saying this makes sense because of the depressed valuation and very inconsistent results over the last few years. And finally, WD-40, the maker of lubricants and cleaners, is also up this morning after boosting its revenue forecast. Analysts are saying that there's higher costs that might eat into margins, but it seems that investors are a lot more focused on this boosted guidance than anything else. And so we're up almost 15% this morning for that company.
All right, Chloe, thank you so much. Chloe will be back a little later in the program. Also coming up this hour, we're going to be discussing the U.S. economy's resilience with Seema Shah of Principal Asset Management. And later this hour, Nadia Wiggen of Svelland Capital joins on the volatile week and several months, in fact, for oil products, shipping and much, much more. SK Hynix begins trading on the Nasdaq today. It raised more than $26 billion in its ADR offering, the largest first-time share sale by a foreign company in the United States. Joining us now is Bloomberg's Charles Capel. Charles, how does this work? Is it just like a typical IPO where we have price discovery, delayed pricing, delayed trading and so on today?
We're going to expect this to start trading when the US opens this morning. It isn't exactly like another IPO because, of course, we're offering ADRs as opposed to ordinary shares. What I would say is that we won't have that pre-opening auction, so we won't have that time when we're sort of finding those bids. We obviously had the trading in Korea today, and it was a relatively muted session, especially for a company like SK Hynix, which is so volatile. But what we are going to see is a massive market event with, as you said, $26.5 billion worth of equity entering the market, and an enormous fundraising effort for the AI trade.
Charles, explain to us the difference between when issued trading, which is today, and then regular way trading, which could start as soon as Monday. The ticker changes as well. There's a V at the end, and that'll be on Monday.
Yeah, so when issued trading is essentially a temporary restricted trading. You often see this with new issues, whereas when you have the full trading, which is going to begin on Monday, then that's going to be a more complete set of trading and slightly more. You're going to be able to have fewer restrictions on buying and selling those shares.
Charles, the beginning of ADR trading, is it very different from the beginning of, a new IPO? Or, these are companies typically that shareholders know, right? So we know a lot about SK Hynix already. We've had many quarters to dig into. If you were interested in investing in this company, you know a lot about this history. Will there be the same kind of volatility around the open as there is typically with a regular IPO where you don't have quarters, you just have the S1?
Yeah, exactly. So you aren't going to necessarily get that initial pop that you would expect from an IPO. Coming up to SpaceX's offering, the question was all about, okay, well, what's it going to open at? And a huge amount of that was because SpaceX hadn't been tested by the market. You didn't have that live pricing in incredibly liquid trading. So, of course, you do have SK Hynix's entire fleet of earnings reports. You've had its trading history in South Korea. So all of that is going to be able to make it far easier to trade this stock. And it is going to mean that as an ADR, it's going to be heavily linked to that past history. One thing to note is that an ADR is worth a tenth of a full share. So the price is going to be slightly different. It's going to be 10 times more expensive relative in the South Korea price.
Yes, exactly.
But largely you are going to have that read across between the two different lines of the stock.
All right, Charles, and just for context, Alibaba raised 25 billion, Deutsche Telekom around 13 billion, so it's bigger than both of those. That is Charles Capel joining us there from London. And do tune in to our exclusive interview with SK Group Chairman Chae Tae-won. That's at 10:30 a.m. New York time. Joining us now is Seema Shah, Chief Global Strategist at Principal Asset Management. I want to get to these Fed task forces, Seema, but first I have to ask you about SK Hynix. Will it be an event? Will it be a market-moving event today? Would you be interested?
Good morning. I think it's very interesting. I don't necessarily think it's a market-moving event, but the main reason it is interesting is because I think the list of names that have been announced suggests that this is actually more of a credible task force. There were some concerns in the market that potentially there could be pickings of very dovish people that could really shift the interest rate function. But actually what we're seeing is that this is likely to be a really credible investigation with hopefully some important findings that is going to help improve the efficacy of monetary policy.
Yeah, so we have a lot of Harvard economists, right, Raj Chetty, but then we also have people like, Walmart's Doug McMillan, for example. This is on the data collection side of things, which would seem to make sense. Walmart collects a lot of data and knows how to do it really, really well, right? And then there's professors from Chicago, Washington, all sorts of personnel. Do you feel like we're going to see a change in the orthodoxy of monetary policy in the United States after all these task forces have come back with their findings?
So I suspect that we're not going to see any really groundbreaking changes. I think the one which is really the most important, certainly, and that could have really significant findings is the task force focused on AI and the impact on the economy, because we do know that it's going to have either very disinflationary or inflationary impact on the economy, depending, of course, what time period. And it really does affect the way that the Fed should be conducting monetary policy. And I think there's a lot of debate about that. So actually getting some really clear investigation into this will be very important. The other one, which will be important, of course, is the balance sheet policy. But I think we already know which way that is headed. The very interesting one is the data force one, as you said. Having Walmart involved suggests that there is going to be that focus on private data, as Kevin Warsh had alluded to. And we do know that there have been a lot of concerns about the accuracy of the data, the number of people who are responding. So I think these are good investigations, but I question whether or not it's actually going to have a very, very fundamental change in the orthodoxy, as you put it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. One of these things is not like the other, and you pointed to the one that isn't, right? The AI task force. So we have Mark Andreessen, we do have Stanford's Charles Jones, and Asha Sharma, CEO of Xbox at Microsoft, right? That's the one where you might think there might be a little bit more of a clash. But also we know that Kevin Warsh may have a slightly different opinion of what AI is going to do for productivity in this economy than many of the other Fed governors and employees and FOMC committee members. Will there be a clash in terms of how inflationary AI will be, and in the immediate term versus the longer term at the Fed in the coming months, Seema?
I think it could be. I think that there is a wider understanding that, at least in the near term, AI is proving to be a little bit inflationary, considering the increased demand for memory chips and how that's feeding through to CPI and PCE. I think the question is whether or not this is something to look through, to respond to today, because it's going to pass within a year or two, or something which is going to become more sticky. Now, of course, there is a debate more generally about the productivity gains that could come through. And if you're going to see significant productivity gains over the next 5 to 10 years, then that should be, by economic theory, that should be disinflationary. So there, as you said, there's a wide range of views, but this is a new topic. Remember, AI is quite new, certainly for the field of economics. So this is really a very, very important and deserved discussion to be having. And I think the market is generally welcoming the idea that this is going to be a topic of real investigation by the Fed.
And Seema, we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you, I know you feel like we are resilient growth-wise. Is there one concern after this week that you might share with us, given what we saw this week? I mean, the market really turned on a dime. As soon as President Trump said he felt like the ceasefire was over, we did see a major shift.
We did. So I think we've seen a shift in terms of market movement. I don't think that's going to have very, very significant impact in terms of economic resilience, because although we have seen consumer spending slow over the last couple of months, lose a bit of momentum, we have seen that the AI capex boom has stepped in as another driver of economic growth in the US. So we're not too worried about resilience, but we do recognize that, look, if this is going to be something which is more inflationary and therefore results in more second round impact, there is certainly a potential impact in terms of pricing for Fed hikes. So I think that's the area that we should be really focusing from a market perspective.
Seema, thank you so much. That is Seema Shah of Principal Asset Management. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. EasyJet gets a surprise offer from Apollo. The PE firm is offering £5.7 billion or 715 pence a share, beating out Castle Lake's bid. Volkswagen plans to cut its model lineup in half. The cuts are meant to limit product options in order to reduce, quote, offering complexity, allowing resources to go towards the highest return segments. France defeated Morocco 2-0 to advance to its third straight World Cup semi-final. Star striker Kylian Mbappe scored his 8th goal of the tournament. Mbappe now has 20 World Cup goals, just one behind Argentina's Lionel Messi. France will face the winner of Spain versus Belgium next Tuesday. Coming up, talks between the US and Iran over a permanent peace deal continue. The latest on the Middle East conflict. This is Bloomberg. A US official says talks between Washington and Tehran are ongoing despite attacks this week that have threatened a ceasefire deal. Let's get the latest from Bloomberg Horizons anchor Abir Abu Omar in Dubai. Abir, is anything emerging in terms of what morale is like, or whether these talks, took a little bit of a back step after the clashes and also President Trump's comments the other day?
Good morning, Vonnie. Well, the talks have already been suspended because of the mass funeral of the late Supreme Leader that ended yesterday. But we were expecting them to recommence once that funeral ended. Now, we don't have a lot of clarity on whether they actually were at an official capacity going to commence, but that was the wide expectation in the region. The mediation between Qatar and Pakistan still very much in place. Now, after President Trump's commentary earlier this week at the NATO summit, he said that as far as he's concerned, the ceasefire talks are over. But then very quickly, Vonnie, he did say that the negotiators, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, can go back to having those discussions with Iran. But you saw the impact on the market on oil. It was almost instant. But then we saw a steadying in Brent crude prices and NY crude prices as well, suggesting that the market isn't necessarily taking these remarks as a promise of a return to a full-fledged war. And this is our latest reporting. Bloomberg reporting this morning, according to an American source, that the technical negotiations between the warring sides are expected to continue. But again, as I have just mentioned, we have no clarity on just when exactly that resumption is expected to happen and where. But when it comes to general markets, when it comes to the wide expectation, we don't see a return to a full-scale war similar to the one that we had back in March, with the entire region really dragged into it.
All right, Abir, thank you so much for the update. That is Bloomberg's Abir Abu Omar in Dubai. Coming up, we're going to be looking at SpaceX and corporate governance. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Vonnie Quinn in New York. When SpaceX went public last month, investors were invited to buy into one of the world's most valuable companies. But they weren't buying equal voting rights. Wall Street Week has the story of Elon Musk's extraordinary control over the company and the changing nature of corporate governance.
Maybe the Elon Musk brand is very strong in the US, but it's not so strong in Denmark. Actually, I would rather say that many people driving a Tesla is maybe a little bit embarrassed about it. And certainly among our scheme members, there's a huge reputational risk in investing in an Elon Musk-led company. So I've been here for 9 years now, and I never experienced in my 9 years as CIO so many scheme members coming back to me with positive comments from a single investment decision as I experienced in the wake of the exclusion of SpaceX.
What do you look for in governance, either to have or to avoid as you make investments?
We hold good governance very, very highly. We think it's extremely important in order to assure accountability and transparency and sound decision making. And I think, good governance to us, to our mind, really lies at the core of the trust that we need in public markets. One share, one vote. The distribution of power should be proportional to the money invested. We have the separation of power between CEO and chairman of the board. We don't like that to be the same person. We think that creates a risk of poor decision making and excessive risk taking. And finally, the third principle is independence. We want an independent board, not only in the board, but also in the critical committees around nomination and remuneration and audit.
For more Wall Street Week's Simon Hampton joins us now. Simon, this really started off with Google, right? And then sort of other tech companies embraced this kind of structure and are getting away with it for the most part. But how important is governance to the global investor?
Yeah, it's sort of like everyone's sort of trying to push the boat out a little bit further. Look, I think investors are always going to weigh up all the pros and cons of buying into a company. And I think the debut of SpaceX suggests that they're buying the story right now. But you are seeing some concerns creep in. We heard there from a pension fund in Denmark that called it catastrophic governance and say they're blacklisting SpaceX and Elon Musk companies. We saw yesterday the news of 2 new ETFs that were filed that were basically everything but Elon ETFs, investing in the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, apart from Elon Musk companies. And one of the concerns they raised was the governance structure as well. So as we see these sort of models where Elon Musk owns 40% of the company, has 80% of the voting rights come in, you are starting to see some concerns creep in as well.
Yeah, as I say, you did see sort of 2 layers of voting rights in some cases around Silicon Valley, but this is really pushing it to the limit. That said, could it be a template going forward for other CEOs and founders?
Well, that's one of the concerns for sure, is that people can see if Elon Musk can get away with this, why can't they? And I think that's certainly going to be one of the concerns raised. So, but at the end of the day, investors are going to vote with their feet. And if they pull money out, it's going to be harder and harder for new companies to justify that sort of governance structure as well.
Exactly, and voting every day. You have to keep an eye on these CEOs and founders every single day. Simon Hampton, cannot wait to watch the rest of that story. And of course, the rest of Wall Street Week. It's on every Friday at 6 p.m. New York time. Our thanks to Simon Hampton and the team. Next up, we'll be looking at energy and shipping markets with Nadia Martin Wiggen of Svelland Capital. It's 5:30 a.m. in New York City, 10:30 a.m. in London. Good morning, I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Let's get you set up for the day. A blockbuster debut, SK Hynix raises $26.5 billion in the biggest foreign first-time share sale in the U.S. The U.S. says talks with Iran will resume despite 2 days of clashes this week. And Fed Chair Kevin Warsh names the leaders of 5 task forces that will examine the central bank's policy approach. So let's look at those markets then. As we await the SK Hynix ADR debut, we are seeing futures pointed a little lower, but markets have pretty much absorbed this latest Iran war shock. We had 2 consecutive sessions now where semis cushioned equities, and volume is just about to run into the summer doldrums. Trading really seems to be at a lull at this point. Let's move to yields because we're seeing them come down, but only by a couple of basis points. We'll see the semi-annual testimony from the new Fed chair next week and what that brings. But for the moment, all is calm on the Fed front. We even have the names now for all of the task forces. And then oil-wise, we came down another little bit, still elevated from where we were this time last week. And it is the first time that we'll have seen gains week over week in 5 weeks. But Brent crude is still now just above $75 a barrel. VIX, by the way, trading with a 15 handle. Let's get to some individual market movers now with Chloe Melee in London.
Good morning, Bonnie. Meta is in the green this morning after a research firm, Semi-Analysis, came out with a report that was very positive on the company's AI compute business. And they also said that out of all the hyperscalers, Meta was the one that was best positioned to actually catch up with Anthropic and OpenAI. And so we are seeing that driving the shares about 2% this morning. Moving on to CCC Intelligent Solutions, an insurance software firm that is up more than 8% this morning after Reuters reported that this company is exploring a potential sale, including to potential private equity buyers. And so analysts have said that the depressed valuation of the company and mixed results over the last few years actually mean that this potential sale makes sense. So we'll be watching out for any developments there. And finally, WD-40, the maker of lubricants and cleaners, has boosted its revenue forecast, and that is really translating in a huge boost for the shares, up almost 15%. Analysts have warned that there might be the higher costs eating into margins, but it seems that this boosted revenue guidance is overshadowing any potential concern around the margin this morning for WD-40.
It's amazing. We all need a bottle of WD-40 everywhere in the world, right, Chloe? Thank you so much, Chloe Melee. SK Hynix begins trading on the Nasdaq today. It raised more than $26 billion in its ADR, offering the largest first-time share sale by a foreign company in the United States. Joining us now is Bloomberg's Charles Capel. Charles, what does the scale of this offering tell us about the strength and liquidity of U.S. markets?
Yeah, look, this just shows the gravitational pull of US equity capital markets. It is an unbelievably vibrant and strong market. Companies can come to the US and raise billions and billions of pounds relatively easily, whereas they may struggle elsewhere in the world. You know, for context, the largest offering here in Europe is just short of 4 billion euros in terms of a new listing so far this year. Hong Kong has also been very strong, but US equity capital markets are really sort of pulling in all of the capital, and they are where companies are going to raise these multi-billion dollar amounts, specifically to fund the AI build-out.
How has SK Hynix's trading in South Korea impacted the fundraising process? So we did see the entire number come down just a little bit thanks to the losses this week, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of the tricky things with trying to build a book or trying to raise funds for a company which is actually currently trading, because you have a moving target, a live commentary on the price. And when SK Hynix first announced this number, the total fundraising was around the $29 billion mark. Then SK Hynix, I mean, it's an incredibly very volatile stock, as with the AI trade, but particularly the AI trade in Asia. So we've seen some double-digit moves and definitely some percentage moves above 5% on the day, multiple of those, which has been starting to move the amount that they can raise by selling that set number of shares lower and lower. We were seeing around 25 billion earlier this week. Now it's gone up to 26.5 billion, but it has made it a more tricky process, as well as sort of providing this live commentary on how well the book building's going.
Exactly. Well, at least with 26 plus, it beat out the Alibaba 25 billion listing. Charles, thank you so much. We'll see how it goes later on. That's Charles Capel, our equity capital markets editor in London. And do tune into our exclusive interview with SK Group Chairman Che Tae-won. That's at 10:30 a.m. New York time. Oil steadying at the end of a pretty bumpy week. Brent currently trading just over $75 a barrel. Joining us now is Nadia Martin-Wiggen, Director of Svelland Capital. Nadia, I bet at the beginning of this week you weren't expecting to see what we saw. How concerned were you after we got the President's comments on Wednesday morning at the NATO summit?
Well, at least he chose a point that we had been in a very low oil price environment heading into that summit. So I think the expectations of the market were that we're going to have this supply glut going into the summer. It's all over. So we're rising from a very low level on the oil price in terms of speculation. A lot of shorts are out in that market. And Saudi Arabia had just dropped the oil price massively. $15 discount for their official selling price for August for Europe, and $11 discount month on month to Asia. So big moves.
Now, how much did we get done in June? So the Strait kind of reopened, partially reopened, but barrels were really, tanks were almost empty, right? Reserves were pretty low around the world. Did we manage to get the ships out of the Strait and start refilling some of those SPRs and so on? Where do we get to? Because it doesn't look like we'll have really normal traffic through the Strait anytime soon again.
Absolutely. So according to us at Svelland Capital, we think we gained around 6 to 7 million barrels per day of oil month on month in June, which cleared out most of the backlog. That includes Iran, that includes Saudi Arabia, the major GCC countries in terms of what they managed to send out. However, the critical point for us is that we didn't see ships comfortably sailing back into the Strait, which then prevents the GCC countries from really ramping up production, and the Iranians as well, where we've had mixed reports on how those fields have been hit. And so it's yet to be seen if there is damage to their actual production facilities. So we're in no way in a normal market in our view.
And you get these odd headlines. So the US targeting Kharg Island, for example, that was out there as a potential. There was also the idea that Ras Laffan won't be coming online as quickly as we might have thought, the LNG facility. So where do we stand now going into the end of July and August? Are things picking up again, or are we sort of stagnating once more?
I think right now things are a bit more paused. What we saw before this happened is a balanced crude market, but refined products were looking much tighter, meaning diesel, and this is helped by those strikes on Russian refineries by the Ukrainians. We hit in June a 17-year low for refinery runs in Russia of 4.4 million barrels per day. And what we've seen this week is diesel cracks have absolutely skyrocketed. gasoline. That's what we need to continue the driving season and so forth. And U.S. refiners have been running at max. Europeans have not quite been doing that. And the opportunity, in our view, for them, when we got some contango in the Brent curve and we had contango in the Dubai market, was for refiners to really buy that crude. They didn't do it. And then China has now announced that they're relaxing their export ban of refined products, which means to me that they're coming back into this market and they're going to start buying crude. So they had cut their imports by 4 to 5 million barrels per day in the last couple of months. So if they're coming back, that 6 to 7 million barrels per day backlog suddenly looks like a much tighter market if they are, in fact, going to hit those export numbers for refined products.
So are you saying that Western refiners may have missed their window?
Yeah, I think in Europe, they may have missed it a bit. In the U.S., we've been running flat out. So there wasn't more that the U.S. could really do. But what we saw in the data last week is that U.S. product exports hit an all-time high. And historically, China has been the OPEC of refined products, balancing that market. And the U.S. has come back despite all the refinery closures we've had since COVID, because Europeans and others have been protecting themselves and not running fully.
You said China is coming back to the market. Where do we stand with demand destruction in China? Does that demand come back online at some point, or is it permanently gone or shifted to another resource?
Well, part of the demand destruction is really this energy transformation and things like that. And we see that not only in oil, but especially in the LNG market. Part of it is domestic production of oil, of gas, further deals with Russia, and so forth. But China's historically imported 17 million barrels per day. In some months, 15, 17 million barrels per day, if you include their demand that includes what goes into storage and what is imported. That's the 15 to 17 million barrels per day. Suddenly, we had them at a much lower number, and that is that flip that the market is concerned about. In addition, in the last 2 years, we've had SPR building in China, we've had SPR drawing in the US, and China clearly wasn't interested in doing that in the last couple of months. I think that their announcement that they will export products mean they think oil prices got low enough and it's time to buy again.
Fascinating. So that rise in oil prices that we did see, I mean, we're back down today. Does it reflect reality? I mean, we're at less than $75 a barrel on Brent now, around 70 on WTI. Is that reflective of the situation and what's out there?
In our view, not. We've really lost that geopolitical risk, but of course we're in the holiday season. So typically, people don't want to be don't want to be short ahead of the 4th of July weekend, and then they kind of fade that rally. We didn't have a rally going into that. Right now, it's really led a lot by algorithmic trading, and this is where moving averages matter a lot. So Brent is higher than the moving averages that we've been below in the last month. So that starts to create a buy signal for some of the algorithmic traders. So that very strong short positioning should lessen. But it's also the shape of the curve.
So prices should come down, is what you're saying?
No, prices should come up because now we're above those moving averages. So what has been a continuous sell signal for algorithms now looks like more of a buy signal to buy for.
I want to briefly ask you about shipping costs.
Yes.
I mean, have they come down a little bit? It seems like they should have, but then again, are shippers really still shipping through? I mean, is it safe yet?
So shipping costs became astronomical. Historically, you want the cost of shipping to be 2 to 3% of the value of the cargo. What we saw already in May and June, in the start of June, is that those prices were 20 to 25% of the value of the cargo. What does that mean? Well, oil prices and LNG prices need to be higher and shipping needs to be lower. We had the market declining on the Brent side, which meant that shipping costs really had to come down, and they did. But now we have this geopolitical premium coming back in very low volumes, so let's see what happens. But Brent was down 18% in June. Shipping costs were down for TD3, 25%. That's Ras Tanura, Saudi Arabia, to China for crude oil. Refined products were down 31% for shipping the index. So they had come down, but we didn't have that volumetric difference to make up for that lower price that you were getting for using your ship, which was hitting the tanker equities. Now we're kind of resetting and looking to see what happens, but we don't see those ships flowing into the Strait of Hormuz now.
We could talk to you for so much longer, but we have to leave it there. Unfortunately, Nadia, thank you so much. much for the update. Nadia Martin-Wiggen, Director at Svelland Capital. Always fascinating to speak with you. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. Fed Chairman Kevin Warsh announced the leadership of 5 task forces to examine the bank's approach to key aspects of policymaking. Warsh tapped several former policymakers, including former BOE Governor Mervyn King and former Federal Reserve Bank of India Governor Raghuram Rajan. JP Morgan building AI agents that beat 60-40 portfolios. The bank has been testing AI's ability to allocate money. The results are based on historical simulations rather than live investing. Shein is moving ahead with prep work for a possible Hong Kong IPO after a years-long effort. The fast fashion giant could launch the IPO in the coming months, pending approval from the China Securities Regulatory Commission. Coming up, Apollo creates a bidding war for EasyJet after a surprise offer topping Castle Lake. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn in New York. A U.S. official says talks between the U.S. and Iran over a permanent peace deal will continue. That's despite 2 days of tit-for-tat strikes this week that threatened the fragile ceasefire. Bloomberg government's Jonathan Tamari is in Washington with the latest. Jonathan, after we got that vote that really chastised President Trump for continuing with the Iran war, does he have a choice? He needs to find some kind of diplomatic solution here. Does he have the power to go back to war?
Well, he probably does, because Congress, even though they've passed these resolutions, they haven't passed in a way that would actually take force, that would have the force of law against him. And there's even significant debate, and the administration has questioned whether Congress really can stop him. There's also an argument that the war has stopped, that the initial hostilities have stopped, and that this would be a new set of hostilities, which would reset the clock of how long the president has to conduct war without Congress's approval. So I think if he wanted to go back to war, he would be able to do so without a legal problem in the United States. I think the bigger issue is he's got a major political problem. This war has never been popular with the public. We've got a midterm election coming up in a few months, and many Republicans don't want to see this going on. And the president himself has said he doesn't want to tip the economy into a recession or see really high gas prices. So that has kind of probably pushed him more towards the diplomatic route, but they're probably not making much progress there, it doesn't seem.
Yeah, so far anyway. Well, I mean, the funeral has been ongoing, so we'll see what happens if and when they resume properly. What's going on with the Election Assistance Commission? So President Trump fired 2 Democratic members of this commission, which does help states facilitate accurate elections, but a Republican member also resigned.
Yeah, and it's unclear. This is late breaking overnight, but we know the president has tried to put his stamp on elections and tried to restrict the ways that Americans vote and try to adjust how mail ballots are treated. He has long raised serious questions about the security of American elections without any evidence behind those accusations. But he has tried in many ways to affect how elections are run, including by getting a bill through Congress that doesn't appear to have enough support to pass. This is one thing that is within his own power to do without lawmakers. It should be noted that elections in the U.S. are run by the states. The states are primarily responsible. So this commission provides assistance, but it doesn't run the elections. So it's not clear exactly what steps they might be able to take with new commissioners put in place. But it is something to certainly keep an eye on, because the president obviously is very powerful and obviously does not trust the way elections are run and wants them run to his liking and wants the outcomes to his liking.
Jonathan, thank you so much. That is Bloomberg's Jonathan Tamari from Bloomberg Government in Washington, giving us the lowdown this Friday. On the earnings front, Delta is the first major airline to report this quarter after the war. Obviously, a full quarter of war in the books. Summer travel demand and higher fuel costs will be major themes. Let's bring in Bloomberg Space and Aviation Managing Editor Benedict Camo. So, Benny, will Delta have been able to get through the war, higher price spikes for fuel and so on, given its position with maybe wealthier business clientele?
Well, we're about to find out in less than an hour. That's when the Delta earnings will hit. And the theme for this particular airline, but also for the broader US space, has been that the premium side of the operation, so customers that are paying for premium economy or business class or first class, that has really held up. And that's really sort of the sweet spot for Delta. That's where they have a lot of their customer base. So that will probably insulate them from the swings that they've seen on the fuel price, from the swings that they've seen with ticket pricing. Another thing that will insulate them to some degree is that Delta has its own oil refinery. That's an investment they made several years ago, and that's obviously paid dividends now. They can essentially sort of hedge their own fuel price, so they can insulate themselves from the swings of the fuel price. So that should have helped them. They did, when they reported earnings last quarter, they did sort of suspend their full-year outlook. So all eyes will be on the outlook this time round. Might they reinstate the outlook? Might they come back with a fresh outlook? So that will be a big focus of the earnings. They are first out of the gate, so in some ways, and they are also the biggest in the industry, so they will sort of set the tone for all other airlines that follow.
Yeah, we'll get a lot of details out of that call this morning. Benny, EasyJet getting another bid. It reminds me of the old joke, you know, what first attracted you to millionaire Paul Daniels? This back when $1 million was a lot of money. I mean, EasyJet has a lot of assets. Is that why Apollo wants it?
Yeah, so Apollo surprisingly coming in this morning, swooping in really. We thought that EasyJet had an accord with Castlelake. That's another US investment fund. And Castlelake, over the course of last month, had made several bids, sort of inching up bit by bit. And then finally, it looked as if over the weekend they were able to sort of drag EasyJet to the altar. EasyJet said, OK, let's open the books for you. Let's have a look at this together. And they sort of tentatively agreed. And now Apollo is coming in with a higher bid still. And EasyJet now saying, OK, the Castlelake bid is null and void. We're going with Apollo. The question now is, can Castlelake punch back? Is this a knockout blow from Apollo? Can Castlelake come back with something even higher and sort of reopen the bidding war? Or will they say, OK, enough, you go and elope with Apollo, as it were, and we've had our go. So that's sort of going to be the next step that we have to watch. What's in it for Apollo? EasyJet is a popular brand over here in Europe. They have a modern fleet. They have lots of very attractive landing slots in places that people want to travel to, like Italy, like Switzerland and so on. And that is really what makes this an attractive asset.
All right, well, we'll watch this space, as they say. Thank you so much, Benny. Bloomberg Space and Aviation Managing Editor Benedict Kamel. Coming up, we're going to get you set up for your Friday trading session. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Vonnie Quinn in New York. Now a look at what's ahead today. Well, obviously, SK Hynix starts trading its ADRs today, at least. Catch Bloomberg Tech's exclusive interview with Chairman Jae Tae-won. That's at 10:30 a.m. New York time. And then we get earnings from Delta before the opening bell. That should be a fascinating read into the consumer and also impact of war and any inflationary concerns. The EU finance ministers wrap up their meeting in Brussels as well. And here's your macro picture for your Friday session. Even as trading just starts to get into the summer season, we're seeing much bigger lull in trading than we have over the past few weeks. Nasdaq 100 futures pointing to a decline. That might all change after the SK Hynix ADRs start trading. We're seeing the 2-year yield down about a basis point. We have all the personnel for all the task forces. There'll be a lot of chatter about that today. And Brent crude expressing calm this Friday too.